Janet Kelly is an interested party presenter, and Janet is the manager of federal government affairs and public policy at Puget Sound Energy. And today, Janet's learning objective is to teach us about the utilities industry and their priorities around climate mitigation. So with that, Janet, thank you for being here, and I will turn the mic over to you.
Great. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting me to participate. Again, as Mike said, my name is Janet Kelly, and I'm Puget Sound Energy's Director of Federal and State Government Affairs. Been at the company for about a dozen years and primarily focus on federal and state policies that impact our customers and our company. For those that don't know, Puget Sound Energy is Washington's oldest and largest electric and gas utility, serving about 1.1 million electric customers and about 850,000 natural gas customers, primarily in Western Washington. We serve 10 counties all the way from the border in Whatcom County down through Lewis County, a little bit of Centralia and Chehalis. We have a really diverse portfolio. We were one of the companies that supported the implementation of CETA, the Clean Energy Transformation Act in 2019. So we will be getting off of coal by 2025. We've already shut down units 1 and 2, where we have a coal plant in Montana, and we're co-owners with 5 other utilities in units 3 and 4. We've got some natural gas, and then we were an early leader and adopter of adding wind to our portfolio, starting in about 2006 with our first wind farm, and we now have 3 wind farms in Columbia and Garfield counties and Kittitas County. We've got a solar demonstration project at our Wild Horse Wind facility in Kittitas County as well. We also own 2 hydro facilities, one at Baker and one at Snoqualmie. So that's a little bit about Puget Sound Energy. I should have also added, I really commend you guys for taking time on Saturday morning to be here and learn about energy policy. It's endearing and really happy to be telling you about a little bit of the considerations that Puget Sound Energy thinks about as we approach state energy policy, which I'm sure may not interest everyone, but I love being here with you all to talk about it this morning. So I shared a little bit about Puget Sound Energy. One of the things that I'm most excited about, our company just about 3 weeks ago announced a Beyond Net Zero pledge. And that really consists of 3 things. Primarily, it focuses on the obligation that we have to meet CETA, which is to be a net 100% clean by 2045. It also includes an aspirational goal to reach net zero carbon emissions for natural gas sales by 2045. It's in line and consistent with CETA. And we have an interim target of 30% emissions reduction by 2030. And then the other element, which takes us beyond net zero, is partnering with our customers and industry to identify programs that help them reduce their own carbon emissions. So an example of that would be electrification of the transportation sector. So we are committed to that. We don't have all the answers, and we know it will take some state policies to help us get there. But nonetheless, we weren't afraid to put our marker in the sand and really lean into what we think a majority of our customers are asking for and demanding right now. So that really brings me to, I thought I would talk about just some of the evaluation criteria as we look at public policy at the state and federal level, but primarily focused at the state right now. So when we're looking at public policy, we have to consider a few different things, and it's a bit like a balancing act, but we are obligated to provide safe, reliable, and affordable energy for our customers. And I know that that can mean different things to different people and different stakeholders, but the line is pretty clear when we are asking and working with our regulators at the State Utilities and Transportation Commission about what that means, whether it's safe, reliable, and affordable. They have a prudency standard, and they are starting to look at the environmental impacts when they add in the social cost of carbon to some of the evaluation criteria. But those are the lenses that we look through. And of course, I should mention as well, equity is a really big factor. And again, equity, I think, is a pretty loaded term, but nonetheless, we know that that is really important, and not everyone has the same opportunities to clean energy that others might have. So we are really trying to figure out ways that we can help reduce the energy burden for those who have been impacted by climate change. So in the state legislature, led by a governor who is very committed to the cause of climate change, he's got 3 primary policies that he is asking the legislature to pass this session. We have supported the low carbon fuel standard. I know we're trying to avoid jargon. So for those that don't understand what that is, the low carbon fuel standard is a policy that's really designed to incent vehicles to reduce their carbon footprint. And it does that by adding costs to traditional fuels like petroleum and allowing those fees that get collected to be distributed to incentivize electric vehicles. So that is one policy that is, I think, at the top of the governor's list. I don't mean to speak for him, but nonetheless, we're following that closely as the bill makes its way through the House and heads over to the Senate. So we've testified in support of that bill. We believe that we have a role to play in the electrification, given that electrification of our transportation sector, given that the state's emissions come in a big part from the transportation sector. Another policy that we are leaning into this session is the Cap and Invest program. Cap and trade, cap and invest. What that does is it really ratchets down the number of emissions that are allowed over time, and then in turn it increases sort of a artificial price on carbon, and it's supposed to incent the development and implementation of clean fuels and clean energy to reduce those emissions. It would impact the electric and natural gas sector, and again, that is a policy that PSC is supporting. We have some priorities, including alignment with the CETA, the Clean Energy Transformation Act. And also we want to ensure that our customers, and especially our low-income customers, are protected financially as we implement a policy like that. The third bill that the governor is asking for is a bill that we believe would harm our ability to serve natural gas customers. It's called the Healthy Homes, Clean Buildings Bill, and that's one that we cannot get behind. We do see a need for dual energy systems. The electric grid has a capacity shortfall. That's jargon. What that means is there aren't going to be enough resources, megawatts, to deliver energy just on the electric side. So we do need to preserve the ability for us to deliver cleaner fuels on the natural gas system. And those could be any variation of renewable natural gas or hydrogen. And we just believe that there still is a lot of opportunity for decarbonization of fuels on the natural gas system to more cleanly deliver the energy that our customers need on those cold winter days. I'll just wrap up and say that the other bill that Puget Sound Energy is looking at is a bill that would modernize our regulatory structure. I mentioned that we're regulated by the Utilities and Transportation Commission, and we believe that modernization needs to occur there. We have a really backward-looking model where we make the investments and then ask our regulators to recover those costs, and we're trying to be more forward-looking. We know that significant investment in the transmission system and renewable energy will be needed, and those require long lead times. We look out 20 years in advance to try to make sure that we can meet the needs of our system and our customers, and we just think that the backward-looking model is not working anymore. So I think hopefully I'm okay on time. That's what I had to cover. And again, I appreciate you all taking the time this morning and inviting me here to talk with you.
Great. Thank you, Janet. And you are right on time. So that was timed perfectly. Thank you. So I'm going to take a quick 30-second pause just to, again, reflect on the presentation so we have time to process before we go into your next. into the next presentation. Reminder to assembly members, you can type in questions and upvote things in the chat. And I see a few questions already coming in, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Great. So the next presenter will be Marco Lowe, who is an interested party presenter presenting on local perspectives from the building industry and climate mitigation. And the learning objective here is to learn about the building industry and their priorities for climate action. Marco is currently the head of government relations at the Master Builders of King and Snohomish counties and developing several missing middle housing projects in Seattle. So with that, thank you, Marco, for joining, and I will turn the mic over to you. And let me know if you're having issues sharing your screen, if you have slides.
I think if everybody can see that, I think we're good to go.
Great, it looks great. Thank you.
Okay, well, so thank you for the introduction, Mike. And as Mike said, Marco Lowe, I both work for builders in terms of their government affairs, and I also have done some small projects myself. And I've also worked on the government side and had builders very angry at people I worked for over what we were asking them to do as an industry. So I'm probably the problem and the solution, depending what side of the table you're looking at. So I'm going to present today kind of the full range where builders come from. And in our two counties, which is King and Snohomish, they comprise about a third of the state's population. We have builders that are very much on the let us build what we want to build, and energy and how we keep these and use these homes in terms of energy is not your business. And I have builders that exceed the energy code, and climate change is at the forefront of their decision on how they build a home. So I'm going to try to balance that as if a builder from each community is on each shoulder and try to give the full perspective. So let me click here and then move forward. So let's just start with some basics on housing in Washington State. We have a housing affordability crisis, which comes down to we have a housing production crisis. If we build more homes, the price would go down. Supply and demand, as much as you see for buying a milk jug at the store, applies to housing. So as we've had job growth in Washington and people move to the state, our housing production has not caught up. So this is, we've seen from 1996, $150,000 average price of home to we're now at $450,000 for an average price in 2020. And that's average. In certain areas, that is the average, maybe double that. So it can be very cute. Now here's our salary increase. At the inverse, $40,000 in 1980 to I think in 2016 I have where it's 60. So we've gone up 2 times the price of housing price, and we've gone up about 50% in terms of income. So housing has become a much bigger share of our budgets, and that is also a problem. So we have let's go to the US for a second. We have 139 million homes. The average new construction is around 800,000 per year. This number can vary. When the market is hot, we have more homes built. After the last recession, we had very few homes built. So we build about 0.6% of our housing stock per year. So just to give you the scope of when we talk about new efficiency and new homes, what part of the housing stock we are moving. You don't have to read all of this, but just historically in 1977, Washington State had their first voluntary energy code. In 1985, we had the first mandatory energy code. So how you build a home, how it uses energy. In 2006, Governor Gregoire began a law that said you will lower over a period of years 70% of the current use of energy in a home. So it ratchets down every 3 years. We just implemented a few days ago the newest energy code, which will increase $15,000 to $20,000 on the price of a home. I think we have builders in our community that are seeing closer to $30,000 on some homes. I will say those are bigger homes. The bigger the home, the bigger the cost to extra insulate and use more efficient appliances. Some of the cost increase is from very efficient electrical appliances, a more efficient heat pump. A heat pump is a device. It's a lot like an air conditioner, but it can either make heat in a house or make cooling in a house. It basically is an air conditioner that can run both ways. We still have further to go. There's 2 more ratcheting of mandates set out from this 2006. So we are adding to the price of homes in an already expensive market for homes. And every $1,000 you increase the price of a home The National Association of Home Builders says about 152,000 families are priced out of that house. So adding $15,000 to a $400,000 home sounds around the margins. Somebody can't afford that home now. And I just think we have to keep that in the forefront as we balance everything. So why do we have the energy code? We had the 1970s oil crisis. Fuel was hard to get. Let's make the homes more efficient to use more fuel. Recently, we've added climate change. So now instead of just the efficiency of a home, we're talking about the electrification of a home. So homes no longer would have potentially a natural gas, oil, or other fossil fuel heating. The two pools have different approaches. We have a, in the efficiency side, the home is tight, the envelope is tighter, the home retains heat or pushes out heat more and uses more efficient devices. On electrification, you are now really talking about the appliances. How do we heat the home? How do we heat our hot water in the home for a shower? How do we cook our food on what kind of range? So the energy code is now diverging a little bit. And that is that I'm again trying to balance our builders. It's not just efficiency. It's not just an efficient home with a natural gas furnace. It is now an efficient home with an electric device, potentially. You can still use natural gas in homes in Washington, obviously. So the energy retention cost to a house is oftentimes the most expensive part of energy code compliance. Window glazing, thicker walls. When you make a thicker wall, you need thicker wood to make the wall. So you're paying for extra timber and then more insulation. Appliances are not inexpensive. There's no way around that. But you are already buying something to heat a home. So when you add the efficiency on top, it is additional, it is not new. So let's talk about the carbon footprint of homes really quick. Each year, the typical house produces 7.5 tons of CO2. Depending on heating methods, the electrical grid, we just heard Puget Sound Energy talking about their exciting move away from coal power. So their electricity will have less carbon in the future. A utility like Seattle City Light that is mostly hydro will have less today because they're generating power with non-fossil fuel methods. Some communities in this country have almost all coal electricity. Their electricity has a lot of carbon in it. Washington State will have a carbon-free grid no later than 2045. Really quick, average efficient homes that we make intentional can drop about 30% of the energy usage. Now, the reason why the orange bar for new homes is higher than the blue bar is because over time, homes are getting bigger. So even though they're more efficient, they're using more energy. That is also a consideration in all of this. Let's go, as I'm speeding along here, home location has a huge impact on carbon footprint. A home that is close to an office and somebody can bike, walk, public transit will have 3.5, on average, 3.5 fewer tons of CO2 than the average commute for the average American. So the two homes can both have, let's say, an efficient natural gas furnace, but because somebody's driving less to work, or fewer miles, that home has a smaller carbon footprint. That is a consideration we don't really take into as much with the energy code. For example, this is Seattle, Washington. This purple is a massive job center for the region. Everything in light yellow is single family homes. So you can only build single family homes in that area. So we have a massive job center and we've surrounded it with a very inefficient way to build houses, not duplexes, not townhomes. That light yellow is a single family home. That increases carbon footprint because fewer people can't live near work. The next thing is electric vehicles. We talked about the 3.5 tons of carbon for a, 1 minute left. Okay, for an average commuter, but you drive more during the year. So looking at a house's footprint outside of the energy code, if it's an electric vehicle, is really important. Finally, what about the existing homes? We're building 1/6 of 1%. 130 million homes are not part of the new energy code in America. And so that's 5.5 million are heated with oil, 90% are under insulated. So final questions, given the fraction of new homes being focused on with the new energy code, are we talking more about the existing stock and how do we make it more efficient enough? Does the house need to be more efficient and electrified, or do we just do electrification or just efficiency? How large is the impact of zoning? Can people live closer to work? Would a rural electric home have a lower carbon footprint than an older home in Seattle near jobs like I live in, which has a very inefficient heating system? And again, what's the focus on existing housing stock versus newer housing stock? I think that's everything, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Marco, for presenting. And that seems really relevant. It seems like a lot of the discussions we've had within the Assembly over the past several weeks as well. So I'm going to, again, do a 30-second pause for people to process, to review the chat, ask questions, and upvote questions that they want to be answered. And then after that, we'll transition into our next presenter. Great. So our next presenter will be Mason Rolfe from Yes Solar, presenting on Yes Solar Energy Works in Washington, but only for wealthy homeowners. So the learning objective is learning about how Washington can invest in solar energy through current net metering laws and other policies. And Mason is an interested party presenter. Mason currently serves as the president of Olympia Community Solar, a nonprofit charity with the mission to steward an equitable and accessible transition to clean energy. So thank you, Mason, for joining us today, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for engaging in this important work, and I'm really excited to talk to you about solar energy this morning. And I hope you're excited about solar too. It's the most popular and fastest growing form of energy generation in the world, and also one of the largest job producers in the United States. Our organization is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're located in the capital city of Washington. And we work on a couple different things. We develop community solar projects, and I'll talk about what that is. We work a lot with education. One of our most recently launched projects is we're trying to get solar training materials into all 12 Washington state prisons so that incarcerated people can learn about entering the industry after their release. And we also work on policy. We're currently partnering with Representative Jessica Bateman to put forward what's called a virtual net metering bill. And I'll talk about what that is too. So our mission as a nonprofit is to steward an equitable and accessible transition to clean energy through community solar. Especially with CETA now, it's no longer a question of if the clean energy transition is going to happen. It's no longer a question of when it's going to happen. You know, we have a clear timeline of that. The question now is really how it's going to happen. Is it going to happen in a way that benefits consumers and reduces their energy burdens? That's how much they pay into electricity every month. Or, you know, is it going to be owned by big corporations and sold to the little guy? And we really want to make it happen in the former way. So check out our work. We're at olisol.org. You can also find us on social media at Olympia Solar. And let's start talking about solar. So the first thing I want to do is dispel some solar myths. And then I'm going to tell you about how our current solar policy in Washington works and how it can be improved. And then finally, where we should go moving forward. So these are the three biggest things I run into in my work is that people don't think there's enough light in Washington to generate solar. It's not true. There's plenty. You know, we don't generate quite as much as you would on the other side of the mountains or down in California, but the technology is there, and tens of thousands of Washingtonians have already made that investment, which brings me to the second bullet. Solar is a really good investment. The idea with solar is that with an upfront investment or with an upfront loan, you can see long-term benefits through the reduction of your energy costs. On average, we see our solar arrays paying for themselves within the first, I'd say 8 to 12 years. And then from there, those systems can operate reliably for 40 to 50 years. So that's all savings for the customer. And finally, a lot of people think solar needs batteries to work. It doesn't, and that's thanks to an awesome state policy called net metering. and I'll talk about how that works. So net metering is a energy exchange with the electric utility. So you install solar panels on your roof, that's number one. Sunlight generates electricity. Number two, that electricity, it goes through a device that matches it with the electricity in your house. Number three there is showing your house's electrical panel where all your switches are. That's how the energy gets dispersed into your home. And finally, number four is the meter. That's your connection to the utility. And the way net metering works is that when you're not generating solar energy, the utility is supplying your energy and charging you for it. When you are generating solar energy, it can be offsetting how much you're pulling from the utility. But if you're generating more than you're using, you can actually have that energy flow back into the utility grid, and the utility will credit your electric bill for that. So for example, here in Washington, say we generate a lot of energy during the summer and not a lot during the winter, we can build up credits during the summer, and in future months, those credits will roll over and be realized on your utility bill. Same thing with, the night and day aspect of solar. You build up credits in the day, use them during the night. So that's how net metering works, and I'm going to show a really quick video. I hope the audio works out okay.
How does net metering work? If you're thinking about going solar, you might be wondering how you're supposed to keep your home powered when the sun isn't shining. Thanks to a policy called net metering, you don't have to worry about your home going dark. When the sun is shining during the day, your solar panels will make lots of electricity. If you're making more than you need, your electric meter will run backwards because you're actually sending that excess energy back to the grid. In exchange, your utility gives you credits on your electric bill for all the power you sent them. Then, at night, when your panels aren't producing electricity, you can use the credits you stored up to get electricity from your utility and power your home. If your panels haven't produced enough energy to meet your needs, don't worry. You can always buy the extra from your utility.
Yeah, so that's the quick and dirty of how it works right now. We have a great net metering law, and oh, where'd my presentation go? Okay, I think that's still there.
How does net metering work?
Oh.
If you're thinking about going solar.
Okay, so that's how net metering works right now. That energy trade is governed by law in the state. It's RCW 80.60. It's great, but the thing is, it's only accessible to people who own a home and have a relatively sunny location. So, I put yourself in the shoes of a potential solar buyer. Question, do you own your home? Do you have the income or the access to financing to pay for a solar array? Do you have sunshine on your roof? Do you have a newish roof, or is it in need of replacement in the next few years? All of those factors can preclude you from being able to invest in solar on your property, which is why community solar is so important. Community solar is a centrally located solar array owned by multiple people, and they all receive energy credits on their electric bills for their participation in that offsite system. Doing that is a function called virtual net metering, and we actually have a couple different projects in Washington. I'm going to skip over that. So virtual net metering is when you build a community solar project, the project produces energy for the grid, and we track that energy, and then local businesses or residents subscribe to the project, and the utility tracks how much energy your project is generating, compares it to how big your subscription to the project is, and then allocates those credits to your bill. So from the customer's perspective, it looks pretty much the same as if you had it on your roof. You receive a credit on your electric bill. So right now, Washington has no community solar policy. So this really isn't accessible or a possibility for people. So our goal is, to see that happen in the next few years. So I wanted to leave you with a couple tangible how-to improves. So with our state's net metering, we have restrictive project size limits and program limits that cause the industry to have to come back and fight year over year to get those extended and expanded. And so really expanding those could help see a stable industry. We need better systems for putting solar on multifamily housing where there's multiple electric meters. And we think we can do that through expanding meter aggregation. And then finally, we really need to support low-income customers and help them access solar. Low-income customers have the highest energy burdens. That's the percent of their annual income they pay to energy. And really, solar can make the biggest difference for them. And then finally, we need to implement a community solar program statewide. And that's already in the process. There's a piece of legislation in the legislature, but unknown yet if it'll move forward this year. So with that, I'll close up and just thank you all for engaging in this important work.
Thanks, Mason. So with that, with some time, again, encouraging people to put questions in the chat. Thanks, Pedro, for reminding of a question asked in the previous session. So just reminding folks that if there are unanswered questions, we have forwarded all of the unanswered questions to presenters, and as presenters answer those questions, we've added them into the Google Drive of all the documents and materials provided to Assembly members, and Wendy will be sharing that link later. So now we're going to go into our final presenter. So our final presenter is Hera Holzknecht, presenting on building electrification and learning about some of the health, safety, and climate risks associated with natural gas use in our homes and businesses. This is actually a recorded presentation from Sarah since she won't be joining us today. So if you have any questions for Sarah, again, this is a reminder to add it in the chat, and we will forward those questions to Sarah as well. Great. And are people able to see the screen? Yes, great.
Talk more about the need to move away from methane gas. One of the co-founders of 350 East Side. I'm coming to you today from traditional Snohomish territories, and I'm thrilled to be joining you to talk more about the need to move away from methane gas use and towards building electrification. The fossil fuel industry has for a long time pushed the narrative that gas was an integral part of our modern households, that it was the best option for the discerning home chef. It was the best way to have control over heat, over temperature when you were cooking, and that it was the cheapest and most reliable way to heat your home. For decades, natural gas has been sold as a solution to relying on other fossil fuels. And the heat trapping effects of methane, natural gas's primary component, have been downplayed as gas infrastructure has been built out. But to reach net zero global emissions by 2050, our reliance on natural gas must end.
The methane molecule, compared to a carbon dioxide molecule, over about a 20-year period is 86 times more potent as a greenhouse gas.
So curbing methane emissions is an important way to affect climate change. It's a short-term climate lever. While this narrative of natural gas being a bridge fuel has been pushed, the hidden impacts of methane gas have been sort of ignored. And these impacts, like the leakage that happens at every part of our gas infrastructure network, and that's all the way from the point at which it's extracted, through its transport, all the way to when it's used in a home or business, that leakage adds up. In fact, the estimated annual leakage for the US in 2012 was the heat trapping equivalent of up to 314 coal-fired power plants. Natural gas being highly combustible has led to its widespread use for heating and cooking, with sometimes dangerous consequences. Across the 3 million mile network of US pipeline infrastructure, a pipeline catches fire or explodes on average every 4 days. It's clear that gas is not a safe energy source. The 2010 pipeline rupture in San Bruno, California is a perfect example of this. The explosion that happened there measured 1.1 on the Richter scale, and 38 homes were destroyed, with 8 fatalities. In 2018, during a much needed upgrade of the existing gas distribution network in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts, an overpressurization caused fires, explosions, and damage to 131 homes, and resulted in 22 hospitalizations and the death of 1 young man. Gas was shut off to the area and over 50,000 residents were evacuated. On the left, you can see over 3,000 leaks of methane gas that had been detected by scientists in the greater Boston area in a study prior to this incident. There's this misconception that so-called natural gas is a bridge fuel, that it's cleaner than burning coal to produce heat and power. And unfortunately, it is putting methane into our atmosphere that is far more intense than carbon dioxide in terms of heat trapping properties. In reality, it's like knowingly bringing a bomb into your house. These pipelines run through backyards across the country, which is part of what makes these accidents so devastating. Seen here, the North Seattle lateral upgrade in South Snohomish County runs as little as 11 feet from people's homes and has a blast radius of 150 feet. The pipeline was expanded in 2019 and will be in use for decades to come. Unfortunately, the climate and safety issues with gas are not the end of the story. 2/3 of the methane gas that's used for residential and commercial cooking and heating in this country is sourced from fracking, which results in devastating environmental consequences for local communities. If you were to follow the main north-south gas trunk line, seen in the image on the left, northward, you'd find yourself in the midst of Canadian fracking hotspots. Fracking leads to tremendous contamination of the environment and results in residents of some surrounding communities being able to light water on fire. Natural gas use also decreases indoor air quality and results in the release of carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and formaldehyde into our homes. This is a huge equity issue, as low-income populations are less likely to have good access to ventilation, to a nice range hood in the kitchen, and are more likely not to turn on their range hood in the winter due to concerns over home heating. Gas stoves cause air pollution, which is linked to neurological function in children being decreased and increases in respiratory illnesses like asthma. These impacts are felt by children especially, as they're often in closer proximity to the height of gas ranges. To change the way that we use energy in our homes and businesses, we're going to need to change the narrative about methane gas. For builders, there are benefits to electrification, including lowered costs for construction without gas infrastructure and safer conditions for workers. For consumers, the climate, health, and safety risks associated with natural gas in the home offer strong motivation to switch energy sources. Alternative energy options like heat pumps, distributed generation, and battery storage can be cleaner, more efficient, more cost-effective solutions. The good news is there are a lot of meaningful ways to take action. One important one is to get educated about your utility's power sourcing. Some of our local utilities, like Puget Sound Energy, are heavily invested in natural gas and other fossil fuel energy generation sources, and have been slow to move towards a cleaner energy mix without regulatory requirements. Comparing PSE with local PUD energy mixes, it's evident that there are better options available. It's important for us as consumers to know what choices our utilities are making, as it will affect our climate for decades to come. Another important way to address this issue is through legislative action, and the Healthy Homes and Buildings Act is one way of doing so. It would prohibit natural gas in new construction by 2030 and fossil fuel use in all buildings by 2050. Please consider contacting your legislator and urging them to pass this important piece of legislation in this session, or signing on in support of the bill on the State House website. Washington is part of a group of states that's leading this charge to advance clean energy in our built environment. Climate change is a complex problem, and it requires a comprehensive suite of solutions. To decarbonize our energy production, we must reframe natural gas as the dirty energy source of the past that it is, and move forward to cleaner options for a better future for generations to come.
Great. So I'll take another 30-second pause for people to again process and add questions into the chat as they come. And in a few moments, we're going to just jump straight into the Q&A. So for Janet, Marco, and Mason, if y'all can unmute yourselves and get ready for Q&A. And as a reminder, during the Q&A session, we're asking people to be succinct because there are a lot of questions in the chat. So with this, the first question is from Travis from Moses Lake, and this is for Janet. Wouldn't it be better to incentivize electric vehicle purchases instead of penalizing gas-driven vehicles owners?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. We are not at all opposed to incentivizing the purchase of electric vehicles. So we're not presupposing one outcome over the other. You will find PSE in the past has also supported policies that would incent electrification of vehicles.
Thank you, Janet. This is another question for you from Corbin from Bellingham. How much of a shortfall with electric only do you predict and when?
Yep, thanks for asking. I don't want to misspeak, but I have a number close to me here. Just give me 1 second. The number that I will share with you is a regional look. It's not just Puget Sound Energy, but overall the region, I believe, predicts to be short, I think it's 11 gigawatts by 2030.
Great, thanks, Janet. So I'm going to jump down to a question from Marco. For the additional upfront costs added with the higher efficiency building code, how much of that cost is recovered over time, and when is the break-even point reached? Solar panels also add an additional cost to houses upfront, but they pay back with energy savings over time. Our large, relatively new house has not had a utility bill over $200 per month through the pandemic from having high efficiency heating and good insulation products. And this is a question from Curtis from Kirkland.
So yeah, let's jump in. So the actual number on that, the payback is, the last data I saw if you're looking at about a third of the savings. And $200 is probably, you need a high efficiency house, that's what you're getting. Older houses don't, which is sort of the balancing act that we're talking about. I mean, we're looking at how the builder did it. Some builders have different approaches to the energy code, but if we're looking at, you know, maybe a third, let's say $100 a month, we're probably looking at about a 20-year payback, or yeah, payback's the right word, not return on investment. In the life of a home, that is going to be seen, maybe not by that owner, but by the total owner. So you will see it, and it goes forward and on. And with solar, you can accelerate it once you pay off the solar panels. The state of Washington no longer does the recouping of costs. So I have solar panels, and I now, you know, save what I produce. I no longer am paid for what the utility takes. So that my payback went from like 7 years to like 14 or 15. But you're in the life of a home, you will see the payback. A lot of the policy discussion is more around, can somebody no longer afford the home, and are we balancing that as part of our policy discussion? But those are great questions.
Thanks, Marco. This next question is for Mason from Charles from Ferndale. What is the price range of a residential solar system in its useful life?
That's a great question. So we measure cost of solar in what's called a price per watt. So it's kind of a unit price. The coolest thing about solar is that it's so scalable. Depending on, say, the size of your roof or your energy consumption, you could get 15 solar panels for a 5,000 watt system, or 30 solar panels for a 10,000 watt system. And that'll affect the price. What we see here in Olympia are prices at between about $2 and $2.50 per watt. And to put that in perspective, for a 10 kilowatt system, which is about what a household needs to offset all of their energy, that would be, you know, about $20,000 to $25,000. So, you know, upfront cost is pretty high if you don't have, you know, a sizable income or access to financing. But what I really want to nail down there is that once that investment is made, if it's, you know, paid through cash, then the customer realizes month over month savings every month from their energy savings. If they pursue financing, then they'll, you know, pay a fee to the bank and still see the savings. So with many of the financing options we see, the financing cost is less than the savings. So with financing, you could see savings month one. And then the last thing I'll say is, for a lot of low income customers, we seek grant and financial support so that they don't have to pay anything, so that we can throw it on their roof. And I'll throw a shout out to PSE's Green Power Community Support Program that offered some great grants last year to support low income customers in getting solar.
Great, thanks, Mason. And this will be our last question, and this is mainly for Janet. And this was actually originally a question from Barry from Bellevue for Sarah, but knowing it seems like PSC might also be helpful to answer, considering the context around both of your presentations. When industry needs very high amounts of heat and natural gas is not the solution, what does industry use?
That is not an answer that I have, Mike.
Okay.
We are the utility company providing that source for heating. I don't know what the alternative is.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Janet. So right now, that's the end of our Q&A session. In 15 seconds, we'll be brought out back to the main group. We'll have a few minutes for break, so definitely take some time to go use the bathroom and get some water, and we'll see you back in the main room. Thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you for listening.